there's the other factor of her husband and his religion that I've heard people talk about, which doesn't accept that version of Catholicism, which doesn't accept Vatican II, which has a very different attitude towards Jews and the origins of Jews and the relationship of Jews to Jesus and Christianity than Vatican II does. They kind of reject that. I think the last pope they accept is a different pope who had much more radical anti-Jewish views. And there's a spiritual motivation there that's there. And since my conversation with her, the spiritual motivation has seemed to be revealing itself, that there's this weird suspicion and obsession, like not being able to let it go and not being able to not stop talking about it and getting further and further into the deeper dark places of trying to portray Jews or at least certain prominent Jews in some really dark, sinister light and create suspicion around Jews as a whole. Because it's not so fair to say, it's not regular Jewish people. They've infiltrated Jews. So now I'm putting all of the Jews who I might approve of in a position to agree with me, or they're like them. I mean, that's not fair. Like, that's insane. That's a trap. You're saying it's Frankists, it's these people who've infiltrated them. And I'd be interested to talk to like Bashevkin about like the actual origins of these conspiracies or these cults and these things that may have existed historically. I'm sure she's trying to portray them, it seems, as much more mainstream and much more present in the current day than they really are. But it's interesting when people who have actually educated on this subject and have read about this can concede certain things like, oh, yeah, that did kind of exist in the way there were a lot of fringe groups that existed in whatever century. So that's interesting. And I do think Candace responds a lot more positively and constructively to people who are willing to sort of listen and hear out and talk about it rather than shout and scream. Yeah. But still, the typical blood libel she's pushing about like Christians disappearing around Passover, ooh, blood, like, and being so insensitive about Jewish suffering and dismissive, it's just like at a certain point, it's not worth talking about it because you're not going to be respectful about it. But anyway, the spiritual motivation behind her sort of Catholic conversion that believes Jews are kind of demonic and children of Satan and rebels against God, there's something to that seems to be affirming in her behavior.